Hello, Earthlings. Greetings.
Yes.
Good to be back.
Hello.
Hello,
Hello,
guys.
man.
So,
Yeah.
we averted World War III this week. That's good.
For
Okay.
now,
Something good.
for a
Something
moment.
happened. Something spectacular.
Um, yeah. So that happened. Welcome. We are three students of the Kabbalist Dr. Michael Lightman. He is a Kabbalist teaching for 40 years or so in Israel. We're all longtime students. And during COVID, well, we're always trying to speak about this in more colloquial language, more normal person language, bring what's in those, been locked up in those treasure houses of books of the sages for all those millennia. Oh, we started talking about it more and more openly, more and more openly. Actually, there was a time when we were like, okay, let's just remove all the words of Kabbalah from it. Let's just talk about the laws of the world, you know?
What you mean
But then
when we started doing dissemination?
yeah, like years ago, we went through this phase where we said, okay, let's like we're just remove what we're talking about, is just laws of nature. Let's take all of the confusing language out of it and talk about it like that. Uh, but our expertise is in the wisdom of Kabbalah. So then we started, trying to find that balance of how to talk about this, but how to talk about it in a way that people can hear it. Because as soon as you say a certain word like creator or something like that, or Abraham, all of a sudden you bring up all of these imaginations. Some people immediately don't want to listen. Some people,
Imaginations, connotations, misconceptions. There's a
yeah,
bunch. Yeah.
right. So our job here, and we started this during COVID when the world was clearly and evidently going through a big transformation, was like, let's try and talk about this again. Let's try this new way of talking about it. Now let's bring the wisdom of Kabbalah in, but let's look at what's going on in the world and use that as our language. Because everyone's experiencing the same thing between the lockdowns and what's happening in depression and with the children and education and relations between countries. Let's use that to
As
as
common
as
ground.
our yeah, exactly, to talk about these eternal principles and these laws of nature that interest us and what we want to talk about. So here we are, um, a couple years later already doing that. And while there are a few weeks from time to time where we meet on Monday and we're like, I don't, nothing's going on this week, let's do a
Happens.
deep dive into the wisdom of Kabbalah.
Boring.
There was no shortage, and it's funny. I wish we should make some kind of chart and rate each week, like
We,
one to
we
ten,
need
on
we need
how
to
intense
ask
the news.
nature, ask reality to just distribute the the news. So
It's like a
instead
roller
of
coaster.
yeah.
So
Man.
this week, as everybody knows, anyone who's not living under a rock, Iran. We woke up on was it Saturday? I
Yeah,
think.
it was Saturday night was
That
the attack. Yeah. Was that an
uh-huh. So
axe?
Iran
Was it? Yeah.
launched.
I think
Yeah,
so.
it launched 300 or so drones, suicide drones, rockets, etc., towards Israel. So after 40 years of using proxies to fire from Lebanon or through Gaza or from here, wherever,
Yemen. Yeah.
this Yemen, this was
Mm.
Iran's first from their land towards Israel. Now, I asked earlier, Perplexity, if there are other countries in the world. Perplexity is like it's an AI tool online that collates. We don't get any benefit from them. I don't know if it's good or bad. We don't get any kickbacks from it, and it could be all crap. So I'm not giving it a vote of confidence here. But it is a instead of just doing a Google search, it collates all these results and lays them out for you. I said, are there any countries in the world that are calling for the destruction of any other countries? And it told me no. And I said, didn't Iran call for the destruction of Israel? It says, based on the search results, there's no clear evidence that Iran explicitly called for the destruction of Israel. I said, try and answer me without any political correctness. And it said, based on the search results, actually, Hamas does explicitly call for the destruction of Israel. But I said, what about Iran? The search results do not contain any information about that. But I asked, well, okay, but what about this? And what about this? Now I'm on the fifth question here. The search results do not contain any information about Iranian government talking about the annihilation of Israel. Um, and then I said,
Listen,
okay, well,
they're good at their game. We got
I
to give
said
them
just
that.
I just said just
Well,
last month, the Iranian president said, I hope to God that we'll witness the final moments of Israel's existence and celebrate its end." And it said, based on the search results provided, Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi did make a statement calling for the end of Israel's
uh-huh. You
existence.
you didn't ask that
So
before. You weren't specific enough.
Right.
that was, but if it, normally what I do is I do a search and I get an answer and I generally live with the answer. And I'm kind of shocked, actually, at what this means for other people who might be getting information. That's first of all, that's not the topic of
You're
our
not
show.
shocked.
I'm not really shocked, but that is scary as hell.
Yeah.
That that
That the search
that
engine determines your worldview, basically.
yeah,
Yeah.
which is not the topic of our show, which is a whole show in and of itself. But while many countries, Pakistan and India aren't the greatest of friends, and there's many countries that have issues between them, you'd be hard pressed to find a country that is constantly calling for the annihilation of another country, to completely wipe out another country. And um, so let's put that aside for a minute. And it seems like this is a new theme. We like set something out and we put it aside for a minute and try and build something else and bring it back to the table. The health of a society, the healthy development is when there's disagreements between people. Not disagreements if you're in a workplace that people should be disagreeing, or not in a family that everybody should be disagreeing, but in a society, in order to manage our development, there has to be disagreements between religious and secular, and they have to be able to discuss these things, and also between the religious. Like, who's to say that you know exactly what God wants of me? Like, let's talk about this. There has to be some kind of healthy debate, and things can't be off limits to discuss.
Well,
Now, what?
science, for instance, would never evolve without disputes, without critical thinking, without debate and dissonance and disagreement. Like that. That's the whole basis of scientific inquiry. That you see one thing and you want to analyze it and research it and see. So that kind of that's the kind of line of thinking you're talking about.
Yeah. So in Israel, in Israel a few months ago, you had big clashes in the streets between different groups. Now, I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't say in any way that they were doing it in a healthy way,
Yeah.
but people are concerned that Israel could become a theocracy, like a Jewish Orthodox theocracy, and then others are very interested in it being in a liberal democracy. And these sides are constantly trying to
Sure.
push their agenda forward in Israel. Now in Iran it's different. In Iran it's a theocracy, and you get arrested if you speak out against the government, or if you have positions like you can't be openly gay, or you get hung in the town square, right? So it's a different, like, this is the way. It's interesting, if there's some God and everyone can agree that God is great, so then make laws of the whole country based on what that God wants. But if not everyone agrees on, if it's not a
Mm-hmm.
consensus that this is, because if that's what God wants, then shouldn't we do what God wants? But if there's not a consensus that it's actually what God wants, then there's a problem. So this show really should be, 100 hours long, and there's so many things to open up regarding because what this conflict, what's at the root of this conflict. But what happened this week is really something of global importance, because also imagine in a country that gets 300 rockets launched at them, and then the whole world is telling them, don't do anything back.
Well, wait a second. Let's first of all paint that picture a little bit, what it means to have, because we've had
Yeah.
rockets.
I mean,
If you've ever
this.
built a rocket,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
if you've ever built a rocket, I don't know if you've done like, something, with your kid, or as you were a kid, you build your own rockets, and you strapped a little thing to it, and you did a little balsa wood, and you glue it on, and then you do the electrodes, and you send it off into the sky. It goes like the psh kind of thing, right? Uh, that's kind of the equivalent, whatever Gaza has, that's what they're making it in house kind of, and it's a little bit cheaper, and just kind of wherever it goes, it goes. And yeah, whenever you hear the sirens and you need to take shelter, yeah, it's not comfortable for sure. But there's something different, I will say, about what happened.
So both you
Um,
guys are in Israel.
yeah,
Let's
we're
say
both in
that. So
Israel.
okay, so
Mm-hmm.
tell us
And
about
Asaf
what that
doesn't even
experience
have
was like.
he doesn't even have a shelter, so I'm sure he'll talk about that. But
Mm-hmm.
it's weird to think it's different because I don't you usually go about your day minus the thought of, oh, at this moment I could possibly die. Most of the time you're thinking, I'm just gonna be alive and there's no problem really. Maybe you're crossing the street and you have these kinds of like near potentially serious situations. But it's weird whenever you know that these rock and then you're watching footage of like it's an actual rocket like taking off like like it's an actual rocket fuel using it as propellant. You're watching these rockets like take off. It's like, okay, where are those going? Yeah, they're coming over here. So it's just kind of you start living a little bit in a different reality where you all of a sudden, yeah, I could potentially die or some serious damage around me, or like it could happen any second. And it was just a different feeling. I don't know, I'm sure Soph had something else going on, but there was a different feeling of like threat. It seemed much more. Not a lot of people went to bed that night. They didn't
You
fall
know,
asleep.
the crazy thing is, how long was it ago? A couple of days ago? Like not even a week,
Last Saturday.
right?
Yeah.
Last Saturday. And it's the crazy thing is, it's not that easy for me to like go back to those hours. Like
No.
it's right. It's like it's everything. It just
Feels like a year ago or 10 years ago or
yeah.
something. It's so weird.
It because I guess being in an existential threat is something that you don't you don't dwell on it unless you're in it. It's like we have a natural kind of defensive mechanism of our ego, of our existence, of our survival instincts, that if you don't want to always feel under an existential threat. And the moment you don't feel like that anymore, that's it. You like forget about it. But there were a few
Yeah.
hours where, like Chris said, it was indeed very weird. It's a strange feeling because, unlike like being in a battlefield, or being, which is a different thing. We should talk about that too. There's a lot to say about that, and there's a lot of Israelis now that are experiencing that, which is another weird situation: being in a battlefield for a few weeks and then coming home for 2 days, and then going back to a battlefield. That's like a weird thing we
Yeah.
could bring up as well. But in terms of those few hours, my wife and I, like, just, sitting talking, we couldn't sleep. And you understand that, like, these rockets are like, there's an hour that they're coming. It's like, it's like we also laughed at it. When you order the cable company, they tell you, you'll get a technician between 8 to 12. And and these rockets, exactly that they're coming within 8 hours and 32 minutes. This is gonna hit. That's
But
like
that
a
was so
weird
weird
thing.
when I was following it on X, because people keep posting like in real time what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like they launched the rockets. I'm like, oh shit, and then it's like, and they'll get there in 7 hours. I'm like, what? You're just like it's like, we're just
It's like an international
like
flight.
launching your space.
Yeah,
It's
Yeah.
such a
yeah.
weird thing.
So you're sitting there waiting for the rockets to rain on your country, and you're like, yeah,
Yep.
that's, I guess that's life right now. Of course, for a few hours, everything wanes when you know that
All the
something
other
really
problems.
bad,
Like,
yeah, something really bad
guess I
might
don't have to go to
happen.
work on Monday.
Yeah, all of a sudden,
Yeah, right.
a bunch of things are like,
Yeah.
perspective is changing. The perspective is really changing for a few hours. That's one aspect of it. And then another aspect that I think is really weird, like strange, weird, but also fascinating from a spiritual perspective. We'll get to that later. But we sit there and we talk, and oh, the kids are asleep. They might not wake up, but who knows what happens, God forbid. But we're like, and my wife and I are like, we're a good, like, we're laughing a little bit, and then afraid a little bit, and laughing again, and afraid again, and like that kind of thing. But we also
That's healthy.
realized that our neighbors are doing the same thing right now. They're also not sleeping, waiting, not really sure. There's a sense of uncertainty, and farther neighbors and other cities and the whole country is in a buzz, in a certain there's something, there's some electricity like in the air. The air is thick, and for a few hours that was somewhat felt. I'm sure different people felt it differently, but there was something that that like a cloud over the entire collective psyche of the Israeli public in those few hours, and that was an interesting feeling.
What did that feel like? Yeah.
It felt like a forced shared feeling of a shared destiny, shared
It felt
fate.
like we were sitting kind of all in the same room a little
Yeah. Oh, nice.
Like we're
yeah.
all
Yeah, exactly. You're sitting in your room right now, but everyone's sitting in the same. Everyone's thinking about it.
they're feeling basically the same thing that I'm feeling right now.
Yeah, to
It's
some,
like very shared.
we're all feeling something that is the same right now, and everyone interprets it differently, of course, and everyone does with it different things. And if you're very religious, you'll probably not keep away from the prayer book, and if you're very secular, and maybe you won't keep away from the social media or the news sites or whatever. But there is the same kind of buzz. I don't know how to call it, like same kind of vibe.
It's like a vibe.
Yeah.
Vibe, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But it did something. It did something.
I imagine that there's, a certain group of people that when they hear the world is ending, like, give me as much cocaine as possible. Like let's go to the, turn up the music. Like, let's just,
Hey, that was going
let's
on.
just live.
That was going
Right, so I'm
on.
sure that,
That was going on.
There's
that-
documented evidence.
There's some
Okay, so I'm
some
sure there's, like, a
journalists
part of it just
documented.
like,
Some people just
we're
went
gonna
and
die.
partied. Yeah, exactly.
Like, let's just get it on. Right. But then there's this other part where maybe this comes from World War II or the Vietnam War, but there was an expression here I remember that there's no atheists in a foxhole. A foxhole
Right.
would be
Heard
like
this.
a hole dug where the soldiers would be in there in the ground, maybe like on a battlefield. If they're shelling you and you're in there, like, there's nowhere to go and there's nothing to do. So the only possible way to survive right now is to ask for help from some other force, because I'm in a hole in the ground and there's tanks rolling towards me. And if that other force doesn't help me, I'm dead.
Yeah.
So and especially in a country like Israel, where you have people who sit all day and study and pray, I'm sure that there was and also that it's kind of in the heritage of the people to have King David's Psalms. I mean, Psalms is probably one of the,
there's it showed that on the night of the attack, that was like one of the highest among, I think, one of the 3 highest search terms from Israel in Google, which is interesting.
which is what?
Psalms,
Was what?
Tehillim. Psalms.
Yeah, well,
That's
it's maybe
interesting
not a good
statistic.
search because most people probably had it on their shelf anyway. But yeah, I guess people who were
Well,
searching
that probably
wanted
points
find it
to
digital.
Or they
Yeah,
didn't
like
have it
more-
on
maybe
their
more
shelf.
secular
The ones who
people.
didn't.
Yeah.
More secular.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. The ones who didn't maybe were looking for it. Yeah, so that's also something to talk about when people like in that foxhole look like what is that? What I talked about this in our Kabu class on Tuesday. You guys probably know it. The Homer Simpson one where the Homer Simpson skit where episode where I guess the plane is going down. He's like, please, Jesus, like, I'll do whatever you want. Please just save the plane. And then like the plane starts getting saved and he's like, oh, don't worry about it. I'm fine. I don't need your help. You know?
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
so-
Classic.
but when people who typically don't turn, typically live their life, normal life, but then you get into a situation where you feel powerless and you just naturally say, well, what other tricks do I have in my pocket? Like, what else is available to me? And you end up turning to that force, that whatever that is.
Well, or
And
not. I mean, not maybe not that specific. Maybe you're just questioning, like getting mad at your son earlier that day, and you're like, "That was that really worth it?" You just have you're in a different mindset. It puts you in a different mindset. Maybe you're not thinking of like upper force or like some providence or something like that. But at least you're thinking and feeling about life differently. You're approaching it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
okay, so that's we talked about this around October 7th also. It's, we obviously, when you're faced with such an existential crisis, so you question everything. Um, and that's maybe the question here. Like, is that what it will take for humanity to get out of
Mm. Mm-hmm.
this situation? Because why in 2024 are we still, like, are the most powerful people still interested in killing each other? Like, why are we still doing that with all the technology, with all the trillions of dollars,
Mm-hmm.
with all the infrastructure? Like, why is that what we're still doing? Is like talking about killing each other?
Yeah, it really boggles the mind when you think about how advanced humanity is, our technology and our medicine and our culture, our movies and the internet and everything, and we're totally still so on the whole, not every person watching this show, but humanity on the whole is still so much, very much immersed in the game of war and killing each other. That's like, it really, it's a cognitive dissonance. Like if we were, if this was like a couple thousand years ago, and it's like, okay, every empire is now trying to conquer territory because that's the way to survive. You need a place to have more crops, and you need, it's like it's all about resources. Then okay, but this is way beyond resources. Like, what is going on here? That's very weird. I mean, any capable, I think reasonable person understands, right? People understand today that there's no real problem of resources, right? Does that sound is it
I
is
don't know. I
this
still think that there's a lot of, especially on college campuses and here, I think there's still this oppressor oppressed mentality,
no,
very,
but
very big. That
people
someone
should
else is
know.
preventing me from, like, they're holding the means of production. They're
Oh,
holding
holding.
the.
Wait. That's a different thing. That also is, a very binary, simplistic approach to reality. That
Right.
someone is always good and someone's always bad. Like, come on, didn't you? It's so all of reality is a Hollywood movie, a superhero movie. That there's the good guys and the bad guys. Like, come on, that's just childish. But and that's another problem. I agree that problem definitely exists. But I'm saying people should know that from a technical point of view, there is no problem of resources. There's a distribution problem. There's a power problem. There's political, like, relationship problem between human beings. How to use the resources of planet Earth and make sure that everyone has food to eat and a roof under their head, above their head, right? But there is no problem with resources in terms of the ability, the technology that exists today in order to provide the basic needs for all humans to survive in a very, very decent way. There is no such problem. The only problem is the relationship between human beings. But yeah, it's just, I think this dissonance is just going, to be more and more extreme as we become more advanced, more technologically capable, more interconnected through communication, more globalized, and yet, we're still trying to kill each other. I gotta say
So
though
so
that, yeah, go ahead. I can say it afterwards too.
we'll finish. Finish. Finish.
We talked about like what I said before, what Chris and I were talking about, how it felt like those few hours waiting for the rockets here in Israel. Um, I mean, that was kind of like the shared feeling, but I think that, I mean, Chris, tell me what chime in on this. We also, for us, it's also different as Kabbalah students, as Kabbalah practitioners. You're in that situation, and you can't not apply everything that you're learning and doing every day to that situation. And that, it's like when that happens, you feel like you feel part of a bigger process that is happening right now. It becomes very clear that this is part of the general evolutionary pressure that we're under as a country and as a human society, as a global society, to start moving towards spiritual development. And that's why all the mess and the threats and so forth, and it becomes very clear. But
So we can look at what's happening, and we can all examine ourselves, and we can understand that we're coming to a point, like we went through a period of rational development. Like, okay, at first we didn't know, right? You can look back to Greek mythology. Okay, it rains, there must be a rain god. Okay, but the sun dries it up, there must be a sun god. So there's all these different forces, or you have all these different native belief systems. Then you have, so there was Adam and Eve, and there was this. And then we came to modern life. And modern life is, well, I have a brain and we have science. So I'm not willing to just believe your hocus pocus unless you can reconcile it for me, right? I'm a modern person and I don't need to believe that there's a sun god and a rain god. I now understand that there's evaporation and there are these different laws, and also the earth is spinning, and when it faces the sun, something happens. When its back is to the sun, something else happens.
right. But we've replaced how with why. With science. Science tells us how things work. It doesn't tell us why.
Okay, but we got to a point where we gave up on like just blind belief. Then we got to this rational state, but we're in a place now, and it's pretty. It seems very like it's speeding up. Also, we're only interested in what we feel, each of us. There are children in the United States called furries who go to school dressed as animals, who poop in kitty litter, who like bite and scratch other children. This is acceptable, right? Like a boy is born and he says, I'm a girl. As a child, they'll like give him hormones. Like we're to change his gender. We're very much in a society now that is operating on how we feel. That's where we're at. And it's very interesting. And we shouldn't criticize it. Now, here's the thing. If you feel one way and someone else feels the other way, what happens, as we see from this Israel-Iran thing, or the U.S.-Iran thing, or the Sunni and Shiite thing, or the Orthodox and secular thing in Israel, there's no shortage of problems, right? Even amongst the Jews in Israel, you have the secular and the religious, and even amongst the Muslims.
I would say especially among the Jews, I would say. But okay,
there's a lot of Okay, so there's no the Shias and the Sunnis also don't have any special love for each other.
But Israel is in the same country, part of the same society, under the same threat, in the same situation, and yet the division is unbelievable. Like it's not, that there's just to going on that tangent a bit. There's something really interesting that's happening right now in Israeli society. We talked about the soldiers, right? So there's a significant amount of Israelis that are serving in the battlefield. We're in an active war in the south, in Gaza, and then also in the north. Maybe now with Iran, it's like, but so there's soldiers. I myself got drafted, as you all know, and viewers of this show also know. I was there for like 2.5, 3 months, right? But I was not in the battlefield. It's a totally different thing. I was 20 minutes from there, but not in there. And it's a big difference. Those who are serving in the battlefield, they feel life differently because they're in a situation where with their team, with the people who are fighting with them, if they don't live for each other, they won't survive. And that's the reality for them. And then they do that for maybe a month. Then they come back home for like a day, 2 days, something like that, for like a rest, maybe a couple more days, more than that. And then they go back to the battlefield. And that dissonance is very, very strange.
Well, the dissonance is not just it feels this way here, it feels that way there. I mean, you can say it, the unity, the fulfillment that you get by protecting, by serving, by living for, it's almost one of the only ways. Mothers also can have it, fathers I guess less so, but mothers, the way that they feel this thing that they've taken care of, and then when it comes out, they have to like continue as if it's still part of them, and that's actually what fulfills them. You get brothers in arms also out on the battlefield. They have the same mutual, like, our lives are at stake. I have to care for you, you have to care for me, and it's another way of being fulfilled, so much so that when they, like you mentioned, when they come back into Israeli society, the dissonance, what's the dissonance? The fact that here the attitude towards one another is exactly the opposite. Here everyone's living for themselves. On the battlefield, everyone's living for one another, and it hurts them. It makes them sick. It makes them depressed to even come back. They're running to jump back into battle because it's so much more fulfilling.
It's very
There's a lot of that.
It's very strange to stomach that. There's an amount of people now, after almost 6 months of this active war situation. There's an amount of people that are wounded soldiers in hospitals in Israel. It's already like, at a significant amount. And despite having gone major trauma and injuries, some of them lost limbs or other things, like they'll never be able to walk again, or things like that. And yet there's a lot of discussion about this in Israel. If you go to visit these hospital areas where they're concentrated,
like rehabilitation centers,
exactly, the spirits there are very high, and there's this feeling of shared just unity between them. Everyone like supports each other and cares for each other, and the families of this soldier, come and like bring food to all the other families, and there's like this camaraderie and this unity. And it's very interesting when our teacher Rav Leitman said on this that there's an interesting incorporation that is happening right now, because between the soldiers and the rest of the public, and the fact that there's a significant amount of wounded soldiers residing in the hospitals and being part of society again, that sort of heals and balances society to an extent, somewhat.
That's special. I don't know if the viewers can really understand. I don't know. You really need to sink into the words that you just said to feel. It's like this child or this baby where everyone is just like,
everyone
their heart
cares
is so
for
warm
them.
towards them.
Yeah.
And then that comes a little bit closer to you. If somehow you have an experience or you see it, it does something. It does heal. The question is, why are they what gives them so much life? That they were filled with, there's something special going on. There's the dynamic with war and threat. There's so many things we could talk apart.
There's Julie just wrote something really fascinating and in the chat, and I see a bunch of friends also related to that. Let's read it. She writes that 30 years ago, I was in a room with 10 other people held against our will by a schizophrenic off his meds with a live bomb and a gun for 5 hours. I found myself at peace because I was ready to die. So, I mean, something real, that's a phenomenal story, by the way, Julie, but I'm saying that something really strange and otherworldly happens when you're under such a such an existential threat. Or, I mean, maybe not, but for some people it does.
Well, most of us
Um,
run our entire life. Sorry, I think I'm too much gain. Most
You
of
are a little bit.
us run our whole life uh, afraid of or staying keeping the fear at a distance, right? Like you hear something in the house, it's like, let me go on Instagram. Like you something is bothering you, like let's go watch something.
yeah.
Like we don't
That's a
want to.
disease of the modern person. We can't be alone on our own and do nothing. We don't even have that reality anymore. Like my wife and I like to watch Seinfeld once in a while. Yes, we're
Yeah.
that kind of dinosaurs, right?
Yeah.
Maybe people don't even know what that is. Anyway, so we like it. We just watch it on repeat again and again when we it's like there's not really too much anything that we that we watch for entertainment, and this is one of those things that we sometimes watch. So there are some jokes that Seinfeld tells there that have to do with like waiting in line and not having anything to do, like and this reality just was phased out from the world because
Obsolete.
there's
Those
no
jokes are
such
obsolete.
situation. If you're in a line, you're in your phone. That's it. People are in their phones all the time. We've lost that ability to deal with not having any stimulation and having to stimulate ourselves, or going through that boredom into like a thought of our own, an active thought of our own that maybe we're thinking about. We're just, there's this white noise all the time around us. It's the TV, the news, it's social media, it's always there. And I think that's how do we get to this topic?
So
There was
Well,
some
I'm
other
excited to
context.
something. Oh,
There was
okay.
some other context.
Yeah,
to it,
go ahead, Chris.
And I just thought that I just would like to contrast that with what happened. When I know maybe it's difficult for some of the viewers, or most of the viewers probably, who haven't experienced like that kind of strange threat. It's like an asteroid. You're like, oh, the asteroid will hit your where you are, and at 7:02, and you're like, what are you supposed to do until 7:02? Like it kind of felt like that. But this white noise that was like, maybe I felt that there was a little bit less of that. It was like almost like people. This is my experience. Some people that I've talked to too. It wasn't like we're gonna turn on the TV and pass the time until the missiles get here. There was something about the threat, and I know we're hovering around the threat and existential threat and everything, but there's something I think that it's applicable to everyone here that's listening. That and Julie also had a little taste of that. It's just crazy. It sounds like the movie Glass. I don't know if you remember. Anyways, that there was almost like this deterrence. Like I don't want to enter into that white noise. There was almost like an opportunity given. I don't want to say opportunity is like good, but there was something very very not peaceful, but it was like refreshing. And not refreshing. Refreshing has a positive connotation. There's something good about this like downtime that Israel had during the night where they were waiting for this to happen. It was almost like a cleansing, kind of like a where are we, why am I here, what are we here?
Yes.
That was felt a little bit, and that's one little moment. It seemed like it was already enough benefit. Send over another 300 so we can get another one of those moments and develop it and make it more and more. It almost felt that beneficial.
Right. So
we're
it's like,
always
yeah, go ahead.
we're always running from our fear. We never stop to look it in the eye, and because of that,
Oh, that was the
what
context.
happens
Yeah.
what happens because of that is first of all, we don't know what we're running from after a while. We're just running because we don't want that discomfort. But when we can stop and look the fear in the eye, it turns out that humans have been around for like hundreds of thousands of years. Like you're not going to disintegrate if you do it. If you stop and look the fear in the eye, you're not going to disappear. Your world is not going to end. You may have to come to some kind of reckoning, but it'll only be for the good. And what we see between the groups that fight against each other now is they just say that group wants to destroy me. That group wants to take everything. There's no nuance and there's no real this is, you if you're out there and you hate Donald Trump, okay, for example, identify the Donald Trump in yourself, meaning locate those qualities that you're trying to run away from. Locate the qualities that you say, oh, he's misogynistic, or oh, he doesn't like the poor. Look at yourself and just say, what are my, like, do a deep soul scrutiny on your qualities. Because what turns out is all of those things that we're scared of outside, we only see the qualities, a baby, for example, is not scared of Donald Trump or he's not scared of a dinosaur. He doesn't even know that there's such thing. We only start to hate and identify things that have something to do with us. So
just as a disclaimer,
That's a
we'll,
pretty
we'll,
advanced.
we'll do Biden example next time, just to make sure that
I mean, a lot of people have a visceral reaction to Trump. That's why I
Yeah,
used
yeah,
it. It
of
doesn't
course.
matter. We
It's
don't
true.
care about politics.
No, but-
It could be Biden. So, I hate the dementia in myself. No, I'm kidding.
you
Like,
you, you brought up something really. I mean, I'm taking for a second what you said and taking it to a bigger scale. But I mean, you're essentially talking about how, from a Kabbalistic point of view, you should see everything outside of you as a reflection of your internality, and that's a very
doesn't
important.
mean I'm a killer. It doesn't mean I'm a rapist. Doesn't mean I'm going to rob a bank. It doesn't mean I'm going to bomb a country. No, that's not what we're saying, right? You don't have to find the killer inside of me, maybe yet, but you do want to look at the fear though, and help me open this up, guys, because instead of running, like this is what happened. This is what you had a chance to do that night. This is what Julie had a chance to do in that room. Like, you have to look at what's actually happening. You have to, what am I scared of? I may die. And then it just becomes peaceful almost. Like, you don't disintegrate. Actually, you get more clarity. It's not a great feeling that I might die, right? But all of a sudden, everything slows down a little bit.
You're
I
able
become clear.
to come to terms with even such a thought just because you have no choice, and that lack of choice leads you to, okay, what if I agree with that probability, with that okay, that might just happen. Then what? And then you start thinking, why am I alive? If you're lucky.
If you're lucky.
And if you're lucky, then, because this is really why does nature put us in situations where we might be in an existential threat? Why do humans have that situation where we go, oh, that we might not be alive anymore? The next stage, the next phase, or the next evolution of that question is, well, what am I living for? What is the purpose of living? I might stop living in a few hours when these rockets come, but why live in the first place? What's the purpose of living? And that's really what nature is trying to push all humans ultimately towards.
Yeah, so maybe this is the help that we can offer here, because we're coming to a place where we will need to deal with, hopefully not in the form of nuclear war, hopefully not in the form of full-out war, but we're getting to the place where we'll feel the contradictions more and more. We'll feel more and more contradictions between us, and somehow the contradictions will remain, but also some kind of, and this is what we are all about, this is what we're talking about, this is the purpose of this show, that even though those contradictions remain, somehow there will also be some kind of connection, some good connection between everything.
So,
and then
this is this is what's happening right now in Israeli society. I don't know if that's where you wanted to go, but that's what comes to my mind. It's not a coincidence that we've we've just talked about how nature evolves human beings towards spiritual inquiry, towards spiritual development, and that's why everything that happens, including those existential threats. Now, what's happening right now in the Israeli public, in the Israeli society, is not a coincidence. There is a pattern of development. If you go back to history, through this grouping of people throughout history is going through some pattern that repeats itself. And that's, from a Kabbalistic point of view, it's not for no reason. There's a reason for, first of all, for why humanity is broken down to certain groups. All of humanity is a network. It's like a global ecosystem or a global organism. Each grouping has a function in the organism, and that function is embedded in the laws of nature. So it's not a coincidence that humanity is divided to the groups that it's divided to. From a spiritual point of view, there's ultimately just 70 roots to all of the different groupings in mankind. Of course,
And you could take the 70 roots and even go back to 7 then, right? So you
Right.
have specific, that group is the liver of humanity. You can't exactly say, but
Right.
more or less, like that's one's the heart
Exactly.
of humanity and the lungs of humanity.
and
So
Israel,
how can you go over, how can you kill them? How is it possible?
you can't
to
kill
go and
anyone
want-
ultimately. Yeah, I mean, people might be killed or die, but it doesn't mean that their spiritual essence has been corrected. Ultimately, all of those spiritual parts that appear to our eyes as people living in different lifetimes in different groups of humanity, they're different spiritual functions in a vast, intricate, single global collective organism. And so there's 70 roots ultimately for all the groupings in humanity, and Israel is actually not part of those 70 roots, because Israel is like a nation of nations. It's an amalgamation. That we won't go into that now, but those people who
Why
listen
not?
to
Why not?
because
This is what they paid for.
I'd rather, we don't have a lot of time. I'd rather go into you triggered me with something. The reflection thing. Okay, so let's do this. What's happening right now between Israel and the world? That is a reflection of a spiritual process that is happening in the soul of every person and the collective soul of mankind. We can unpack that. Is that a good enough
Please do.
Okay,
setup?
so wait a second.
Sounds great. I would buy it, but I have no idea. When I got
Okay.
home and I opened it, I have no idea what I
Okay.
got. So
Wait, Chris hesitates. What? Should we go there or not?
Well, it just made me. It made. First of all, it set the stage because when we talked about escaping and having this static white noise all the time, really, what's the most uncomfortable is a person not having an answer to that question, like why am I living? Like what's the purpose? And because of that sting, it really is like a pain. Maybe they don't realize it. Maybe they do realize it. Leads them to just be distracted, right? So then when you present here's the purpose, well, for Israel, hopefully they'll eventually listen in the future. But if by what you described, this like giant body, that there is a purpose, there are these pieces and there's a liver and all this, let's say that my liver is diseased and I start having yellow eyes or whatever, jaundice, or your skin or whatever, are you going to try to treat the skin, or are you going to figure out where the root of the problem is? And if all of these nations and all of these peoples are part of just one body,
Yes.
then you're not exactly looking for some spot treatment. You're looking for this holistic approach. And
You got to solve the problem.
getting to that holistic approach.
Look,
there's
if you have
a purpose in each and every one of us.
You just said it. If you have a rash, you're going to need to put something on your skin. But if the rash comes from something inside your body, you have to deal with that. Otherwise, it'll keep coming. It'll
Right.
just keep coming. That's what's happening between Israel and the world. I mean, so let's unpack that. So what is happening to Israel right now? It's a small country, very small. The people need to just go to Google Earth for a second and get a proportion of like what are we talking about here? It's ridiculous. Like the when you think about like physically, like this tiny piece of land, this tiny and so much creating so much ruckus. Is ruckus a good word?
I think
I don't know.
I think you can
But
fit 37 states of Israel in Texas.
here's
I think
that's
37 is the
nice
number.
one. Okay, that's a good one-liner to give people perspective. And what this little country is now feeling is that we're feeling increasingly surrounded. This is what's kind of beginning to be felt here. People who live here feel this. The closer circle around the country, around this country, is many countries, most of them Arab countries, that are gradually becoming more and more actively hostile. Did you just see what kind of rhetoric is coming out of Turkey these days in regards to Israel? That wasn't the case 6 months ago. Since October 7th, things are ramping up. And if you look at the map, you see that around Israel, all of those, like you have Jordan and Lebanon and Syria and Egypt and, Turkey, Iran a little farther away, Saudi Arabia. We're surrounded by a bunch of countries. A lot of them are becoming more and more hostile. Then the farther circle, I'm just talking geography right now. I'll explain the relationship to spirituality in a second. But the farther circle, like the Western world, America, Europe, that is Russia, like the farther countries, they maybe are not actively hostile, but they're becoming less and less and less supportive of this country, less in support, more and more developing a negative attitude towards the Israel. Doesn't matter whether for them it doesn't even matter whether you're a Jew living here or Jew living, there's something about Israel, just doesn't feel right, doesn't feel good. And there's more and more, and so Israel is in the middle of just being surrounded into a certain, I'm going to use a word for a reason here, but it begins to feel enslaved by the rest of the world. Surrounded from all directions and to some extent enslaved. Now, this is parallel to the spiritual process that happens in any person's soul. Because how does a person develop towards spirituality? And I'm talking, real spiritual development, not just, I open a New Age book and then I think I'm like, oh, I discovered God. But real transformation of human intention to
real change.
Real change. So how does that happen? It happens when you start from a very, very tiny desire for the spiritual world, for spiritual revelation, for connection with the governing force of reality, the governing force of nature, the creator, call it whatever you want. It's a very tiny, very small, insignificant desire in a person. And the more you develop, you discover that this tiny desire of yours is actually surrounded and even enslaved by all of your other desires. And all those other desires are bigger, greater, stronger. And at some point, what happens in the spiritual process is that you understand that there's no chance for that tiny desire to fight against all those other desires that you have. There's just no other choice.
It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how much good PR Israel has, or how many first to the scene at a disaster.
That's already you're already like drawing the parallels, exactly. But that's why it's not going to work, because this is what we're seeing is Israel and the nations, Israel and the world is a reflection of the spiritual process taking place in the human soul, and it just appears that way. That there's a group of people in a country that's small and surrounded by and so on, but that what needs to happen is that if we want to draw the parallel, is that from a spiritual, let's talk about the spiritual process first, right? So inside a person's heart, there has to be a realization that you can't fight all of those other desires with this tiny desire for spirituality. There's just no way to do that. The only thing that can happen is that all the desires of the person, have to somehow come together under a new intention, a new direction, a new purpose to their existence. And that tiny desire for spirituality has to show the way. It has to show the direction. The word Israel represents that tiny desire, that it actually means Yashar El, straight towards the Creator. And so
Hold on a minute. Hold on.
Okay.
This is like
this is a lot in a short time. I know. It's too ambitious.
I love all of it.
Too ambitious for the last 3 minutes of the show. Okay.
I just want to say that somebody without any preparation for this, all of a sudden,
Yeah,
you see a country in the Middle
you
East,
won't
but
get
it's
it.
actually
Yeah.
what's going on inside your soul.
You
know, like
It's good to
so-
hear about. It's good to,
Yeah.
to hear.
It's wonderful, but I think there needs to we need to open up a little bit of perception of reality, because
Yeah.
I was buying it. I'm going along for the ride with you here, but I'm like, does everybody understand?
No,
this dude
they
just
don't.
Said
No, they don't.
The country
This-
in the Middle East is actually in my soul. I don't understand.
Yeah.
What, so
Well, wait a second. Okay. So a few decades ago, this country was founded, and they wanted to escape, persecution and be left alone, and that was their reason that they came, and that's united them. We need to protect ourselves, and that's united them. And now we're this country's at some kind of crossroads, right, where that purpose no longer really serves them. That doesn't actually do the job anymore. Yeah, and it's interesting. I've heard a couple times on the news mentioned that this is like this new independence, war for independence, kind of. They're even labeling it this way, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
what's the new war for independence? What's the new war for independence?
That they're saying that this new conflict that we're experiencing now is like another war of independence. You have your earlier war of independence, and then this is a kind of like version 2.
Like you guys said earlier that like you 300. And I saw a picture of one of those rockets that landed down by the Dead Sea. It's like as long as this whole room. It's like wide as
it's a rocket.
like wider than this
crazy.
table. It's like the size of a bus. And hundreds of them were flown over. Like that happened, and we kind of already put that out of our mind. And also, 300 of them were stopped before they landed in the country, like by some absolute ridiculous.
Yeah. By the way,
So tell us
on top of
the
it.
stuff. There was some
there's
statistics
a
some mathematics
physicist.
there.
There's a physicist that looked into just what just
probability of
happened.
that
Yeah,
being able
what
to
just
happen?
happened? Like, how does it make sense? By the way, it's 350. That's pretty much the number. 350
Projectiles.
different kinds of
And
projectiles.
all
that-
of these, just to give everyone context, all of these different defense systems and other planes that shot them out of the sky managed to. There was no Israeli deaths. I think one Palestinian girl died or something, right? One child
Bedouin.
died from one of the rockets.
A Bedouin.
A Bedouin
She was
girl.
injured.
I'm not.
Oh,
She was
died
injured.
already?
I don't
Injured.
think she. I hope she didn't die yet. At the
Okay,
end.
but
I
It
don't
was
know.
pretty serious,
It's
though.
But
it's. I mean, one
seriously
of the
wounded.
a couple of those could have wiped out thousands of
Yeah,
people.
no, and yeah, he so that physicist says that this is we're talking about something that even the people who create the defense mechanisms, they say this is up to 90% success rate, and this is 99%. This is there's everything had to work in complete unison for that, and it just happened. But I think, look, we're at the end of our time here. Let's try to I went too deep too fast, and we're not going to be able to accomplish that in an understandable way for people without sufficient background, Kabbalistic background. But let's just say on the face of planet Earth, where is this going? Where is this whole thing going? I mean, if I don't know how well people understand that the world is completely interconnected, and this is why all the leaders, the Western leaders, Europe and America and everything, everyone is trying to curb Israel from responding because they're afraid that this might develop into a big thing. It's no longer just
How many
a
other
local
countries would get
local
300
event.
rockets shot at them and then not retaliate?
Yeah, it's a good question. But okay, if Israel retaliates, then Iran which is, again, like you said, it's a kind of a theocracy. By the way, the surveys talk about like 70 or 80% of the people are against that regime. It's a
In Iran.
in
against
Iran.
their own
Yes,
regime.
yes, of course. I'm no Iran no
and
Iran
I think the
expert, but this
Iranian
is
people and
what's
the
being
Israeli
said.
people would be very close friends.
Of
and they're
course,
very-
if you ask our teacher, he'll tell you, that like we could be great friends, not just with the
Iranian
Iranians, even with our cousins that we were in the worst state with them. But yeah, but the problem is, the problem is, okay, are we now, if Israel now retaliates, now then Iran, now again, where are we going? We're in some sort of catch
How do you
22
stop it,
here.
then?
Yeah, how do you stop it? It's a roller coaster, and this one has global ramifications. And the only way out, it's like what's happening today in the world is through these horrible wars, and this horrible violence, but as horrible as it is, it marks a new stage in the global interdependence of mankind, and we've entered a stage where we can no longer go back. And we were so interdependent that every little thing, affects the entire world, and this is not a little thing. This is a big thing, and the only way out, the only exit, from a Kabbalistic perspective, is spiritual. The world is waiting for a profound transformation in the human
the
heart.
whole world needs to go through what you guys felt when those 300 rockets were coming, or like what the person feels that there's no atheist in the foxhole. The whole world needs to look the fear in the face and say, what are we living for? What
Eventually,
is the
the whole
purpose
world.
of all this?
And I'll say one more thing that, we already opened it, so I'll just say it. Yes, the world needs to go through this change of heart, change of consciousness, whatever you want to call it. And there is some key to this transformation that lies in the relationship between Israel and the rest of the world. Let's just leave it at that. Why? Okay, we won't be able to explain all of it right now, but just remember, the world is an ecosystem. Everything is connected. No country, no population, no grouping of people is isolated or lives on its own. We are a single organism, a single ecosystem. And in an ecosystem, yes, you have different organs. And they're different, and they're even opposite. They have different functions. The lungs do a completely different, an opposite action from other organs in the body in terms of what they do with the blood, for instance. There's different species in an ecosystem. They all have different roles, and all of them are important, but they have different functions. And in your body, you need a heart to pump the blood, right? You can't do without that organ that somehow streams the blood to the rest of the body, and then then all the different species and all the different organs need to do their job. And so we're in a situation like this. This is where it's going. The only way out or way up is spiritual. And this is where nature is pushing the whole world right now. In Kabbalah, we're not fortune tellers. We don't do fortune telling, but we do study the general direction, the general trend of development. And there's a free choice in this process too. The more we understand where nature is pushing us and align with it, the less evolutionary pressure needs to be exerted on us.
You mean threat? Evolutionary pressure,
Yeah.
threat. What is a threat? A threat is just a great tool that nature has to get us to start thinking.
Yeah.
And it works.
So, we can't open more than that, I think, at in 6
They're
minutes.
gonna be mad at us. We're already 7 minutes
yeah,
over.
but I mean,
All right, we're hoping
Yeah.
for here's the thing, we're hoping for a world of no wars.
yes.
We're hoping for a war that's good for everyone. But it can't happen without us going through transformation. It can't happen. We have to feel that our life is in danger, but it's actually good and calm. we one way or another we have to emotionally go through the transformation. It won't be that we can just live a peaceful life and continue to exploit each other, go on living on the back of each other. That nature won't allow us to do that. So let's make an effort to avoid all of the wars by going through these emotional processes, looking at those fears, looking what I've been running away from, looking at why am I living? Stop for a minute. What am I running from? What is important in life? If I knew a rocket was coming down on me, what, and I could change something, if I said, oh, if I could just do it again, I would do it like this. What would you do? Let's start from there. Next week, we'll be exiting slavery. No, next week is Passover, and I think we will not have a show. Is that correct, guys?
Yeah, I will
Probably
be
not,
away, and yeah,
Okay,
I
so let's
think
say we
I
won't have
think
a show
we'll
next
all
week.
be with families probably, so no show next week.
Okay. The
But
last weekend in yes, the last weekend in May, so May 29 or May 30, June 1, the end of May, beginning of June, that weekend there, whatever the dates are, we will be with some of the other Kabu instructors in Holland. Let's put Chris, if you can put whoever's got the official chat
yes,
there,
Oh,
put
I'm not
the
even.
link.
I'm not even there.
We will be there.
retreat.kabiconnect.com.
We will be
Uh,
studying original sources. We will be eating together, meals, walking on nature walks, having opportunities to discuss, open up, plenty of time to discuss all of these things that are meaningful to us and connect with the wisdom of Kabbalah and other people like us who are also yearning for this meaning in our life and who found an authentic method, authentic sources, and a teacher. So thank you very much for being with us. We will see you not this Thursday, the next Thursday.
Hmm.
Be safe, everybody.
and
Big
check
hug.
out the retreat site if you're interested.
Peace will reign again. Do you remember when things were so easy then? Just as children we went rumbling through the garden. Now it seems alas something has come between us that will not allow one another to feel each other. The winds of war are blowing and we don't wanna go. The winds of war are blowing and we don't wanna go. If we keep our heart together in the dark of night and act so love between us will bring dawn to light. Now we can't deny we need the love to be strong. So when the olive branch falls, we will all be one. Peace will reign again. Peace will reign again. Peace will reign again. Peace will reign again.